A pair of white-throated dippers feed their young in their nest on a remote stream high up in the Mongolian Altai. A few months after recording that, I was already making plans to return the following summer to make the fourth film in my series on the dippers of the Altai. I would have to be there a bit later in the season in order to catch the early life of the dippers after leaving the nest, but things didn't go to plan. Like so many, I hadn't foreseen the COVID pandemic. So in 2020 and 2021, I stayed at home in England. White-throated dippers are common in the UK, so I could film them here. But the Altai dippers behave very differently, and I wanted to learn more. So in June 2022, after COVID travel restrictions had been lifted, I set off again for Mongolia. This is the story of what unfolded on that trip, my fourth dipper watching expedition to the Altai. I spent the first few days in Ulaanbaatar. Driver Harzlai helped to gather equipment and supplies. Munkjago, Mongolian expedition storekeeper, issued most of the camping equipment, and we picked up other things in the shops with assistant Batwire. Soon we were on our way to the first of our dipper sites in the Altai. We are the same team as in 2019. It's Harzlai's second trip and Batwire's fourth. We're heading generally west, and we have about 1,400 kilometers to go. In Mongolia, it's the custom never to tempt fate by forecasting your arrival time. We've done 650 kilometers now, so we're almost halfway. We fill up with petrol at every opportunity, just in case of shortages ahead. New stretches of road have been opened since I was last here, and despite the occasional hold-up, we're making good progress. Harzlai is very considerate of other road users. Apart from sheep and goats, the road has been pretty empty. This is the first significant traffic we've seen all day. We've done about 1,100 kilometers now, so not that far to go tomorrow. We're camping tonight 70 kilometers west of Altai IMAG Center. Today we'll head to Dariv Sum in Hovd-IMAG, past the Khoshot coal mine, and south via Tsetsek-Sum Center to the Myangan-Orgelset National Park, specifically to the Hyakt River, where we filmed dippers feeding young in the nest in 2019. What we hope to see this year is the young out on the river. Harzlai has changed his vehicle since the last time I was here, and his Russian-made fourgon van is going very well. All the way down here from Tsetsek-Sum, we haven't seen any water in the river. Only just in the last kilometer or so, there's been some stretches with water, but other stretches are still dry. It must be tough for the herdsmen around here. I wonder what we're going to find on the shack. This is looking good. Lots of water. The water's clear, and there are plenty of dipper droppings on the rocks. There's a lot of dipper food, like the caddisfly larvae on the bottom of this stone I picked up from the stream bed. We set up camp yesterday, soon after we arrived. In the afternoon we searched upstream, but we found no dippers. And then in the evening we went downstream. And there, about a kilometre below camp, we found first one and then a second dipper. A pair, one of them with darker plumage than the other. They obviously had a nest, and we found it very quickly. Both parents are feeding the young. A lot of caddisfly larvae and some aerial insects too. Each parent has been coming in with food about 8 times per hour so far this morning. You can hear the chicks calling each time one of them approaches the nest. It takes the parents only 1/6 of a second to hand over the food. We did some unsystematic sampling, just to get an idea of what food is available. Insect nymphs and larvae, particularly cased caddisfly larvae, are really abundant right here by the nest. The parents also pick up the chicks' droppings, and usually take them to a particular rock in the center of the stream. By removing the droppings, dippers can make the nest less visible to predators. But this nest is on a sloping rock face, so traces of droppings are quite visible despite the efforts of the parents. I get to the nest each morning around 6 a.m. Both parents are usually feeding the chicks at that time. And this morning the male has been doing more than the female. In this pair, the darker bird is the female, and the lighter one is the male. We know because the darker one has been begging for food. After a flurry of activity, they'll sit and do nothing for a while, either some way away or here near the nest. It's usually the male who sits near the nest. But right now the female is sitting in front of me. The female doesn't preen so much when she's here, but the male spends 10-15 minutes preening and then singing kind of warbling song. Once he stood singing for 5 minutes right outside the nest. He may be passing on specific song patterns to his chicks. We walked 7 kilometers upstream looking for more dippers, but we found none, and no recent sign either. Then in the evening, we saw Siberian ibex on the hill above camp. Well, it's the 6th of July now. We've been here 5 days. We found this nest on the first evening, and we've been watching it on and off ever since. The chicks are now being fed over 20 times per hour. This is the darker bird, the female. And here's the lighter one, the male. So the chicks are still in the nest. And I don't know how old they are. We've had a glimpse when they reach out for food. But it's very quick. Dipper chicks stay a long time in the nest, around 23 days. We don't want to spend the whole trip watching chicks being fed in the nest. We filmed that in 2019, so we have a decision to make. Wait here for these chicks to come out, or go on somewhere else to find chicks already on the river. And so far, I'm in favor of staying here. The female is just back again. She's off again, far downstream. Here she is again. I'm just keeping a tally of how often she comes, how often he comes. The female has been doing most of the feeding. 71 visits by her, only 40 by the male in 4.5 hours of observation. Sometimes, the moment a dropping falls from the nest, one of the parents flies in or swims in to pick it up. Once the female even fished a dropping out of the water. Overall, the adults are removing 3 or 4 droppings per hour, but they often let droppings accumulate under the nest for a while, and then have a blitz. Earlier this morning, they took away 5 in 5 minutes, and then 12 in 30 minutes. The female is taking away twice as many as the male. Here's the female with food. Back to the normal rock, and then a local dive. And the male too. They often dive for food right here opposite the nest. Sometimes making 3 or 4 feeds in a row before flying off again. They also take insects on land, but much more rarely. Just before going to sleep, just going through and tallying things. Otherwise, it gets a bit of a mess. One can't read what one's written in a hurry. The young ones are still in the nest. They're getting bigger and bigger. They almost look like they're falling out of the front of the nest with their beaks pointing down towards the water, almost as if they're overbalanced one day. Harzlai has joined me, and also Usukbar, who is here with his family. They have set up a couple of gears just downstream. His father, Jamyan Nedag, came over to see us earlier. They are collecting meadow cranespill leaves for marketing as a herbal tea. Usukbar is very interested in what we are doing. He's never seen a dipper nest before.
Yes, ямар хурд өгчөөсэй.
Daarаас нь бач харж болохгүй юу. Бид саад өгмөр. Аюул чадвар хэрвээ уурхан явна. Ийс уурхан. Эд гап. Даран өгөн. As with all wildlife watching, there are long periods when nothing much happens, and then suddenly there's a burst of activity. When the parents meet at the nest, they use a recognition call that reinforces the bond between them. That may be important in preventing attacks by intruding males. We've set up a trail camera to catch any activity at night. We got Usukwaya's horse, but the birds are so fast they leave no image. On the walk down here this morning, I saw a nightjar fluttering around me. When they land, you look again, and in a flash, they're gone. Chicks are still in the nest. One in particular has his head really way down, looking out of the nest, down towards the river, almost like he's wondering what's out there. But they still get fed. The chicks start calling well before the parents arrive at the nest. It may be that they're responding to communication from the parents that we cannot hear. And they call even when the parents are just picking up droppings. I keep a tally of the number of feeds in every 10-minute period. The chicks are being fed more often today, around 25 times per hour. But in each hour there are 2 or 3 10-minute periods without feeds. Just now there was a horse above the nest. And the female was very reluctant to come and feed. The dipper alarm call is particularly strident above the roar of the water. Hurle and Batbayr are suggesting we move camp to be nearer the nest. But I'm quite happy with the 20-minute walk. We are keeping disturbance from everyday camp life away from the nest. And it really can't be that long now before the chicks are out of the nest anyway. Well, it's the 9th of July. It's our 7th day here. And the chicks are still in the nest. They're sticking their heads out further and further. And they seem well feathered. So they should be out soon. I've seen up to 3 heads at the same time. But dipper chicks come to the front in turn, resting at the back after being fed. And I guess there are more than 3. It's 8:30 now, and this chick is looking pretty interested in the outside world. Here he comes. Yes, the first one is out, and there was another just behind. He already seems to be almost bobbing. The dipping of the dipper. He's clinging fast to the rock with those big dipper feet and claws. It's amazing. The female is just upstream, but not really taking any notice. And the young one's going slightly, almost slipping down the slope now, pecking a little bit at the rock. The female has gone away. Looks like he wants to go back into the nest now, trying to turn around. It's amazing how completely they're fledged in that nest. Managed to fly straight across. Young dippers can both fly and swim strongly when they leave the nest at the normal age. The chick has been on its own for a while. There's no sign of any of its siblings following yet. It's now 20 minutes since it emerged. Here's the female, back with food. Now the male has started feeding too. The chick has been going in and out of this cave beside the nest. This is really odd. I don't know what's going on here. It almost looks as if she's trying to brood the chick again. I've never seen anything like it, in any species. She's singing constantly. In Europe, female dippers rarely sing after incubation starts, so it's interesting to see her singing so much here. The female stood on the chick's back for about 30 seconds and has been gently pecking it for another 90 seconds since. The chick seems submissive, almost crouching at times. Is the mother teaching it something? Otkenbayr, Usukbayr's brother-in-law, arrived back from collecting meadow cranespill leaves just now, and has joined me at the nest. Another chick seems ready to leave. Meanwhile, the first chick to emerge has got stuck trying to climb out of the water. The female has fed this chick 40 times since it left the nest, and during those 6 hours, she's fed the chicks in the nest 80 times. Both chick and mother have gone upstream. Budbayr is helping to keep track of the chick's movements. The female is still splitting her time, feeding out on the river about 6 times per hour and in the nest about 10 times per hour. I'm spending most of my time at the nest, waiting for a second chick to emerge. The first chick has just come back to that cave beside the nest. That's a foot out now. Is this another one coming out? No.
Well, that was a pretty phenomenal day.
Apart from the excitement of seeing the first chick emerge, this is what stood out today. Extraordinary behaviour.
It had the effect of making the fledgling lie down.
Between us, we've seen it 5 times, mainly by the female.
She would flap her wings and also peck him a little bit.
It happened just after feeding, and she sang each time throughout. Could this be strengthening the chick's leg muscles? We saw the male doing it once, also singing and pecking the chick. Both parents pecked the chick on other occasions too.
The male, I haven't seen since 11 o'clock this morning. He fed the young one on the river a few times and then disappeared.
Another chick has just come out of the nest, and he's going gingerly down the slope, just like yesterday's chick. And just like yesterday, straight into that little cave by the nest. He's heading downstream now. I'm going to follow him for a bit. Now I'm back at the nest and waiting for the other two chicks to emerge. The male is back, having been absent from 11 yesterday morning until evening. Now he's feeding the chicks in the nest. And the female too. And they're still taking the droppings away. Quite surprising, I think, to be continuing this late, even after two chicks have already left the nest. In Europe, dippers stop collecting the droppings up to a week or more before the chicks leave the nest. I got here at 6 this morning, and this is the first sign of activity. She's fed the nestlings 8 times in the last 10 minutes. Over the whole day yesterday, she fed the chicks 10 times per hour, compared with the male, who only fed them twice an hour. One of the chicks is now putting his head out and looks as if he might be going to make a move. Well, he's retreated back in again now. So it looks like a long wait. The two chicks on the river are difficult to find unless we see the parents arrive with food. Budbeier had spotted them under the bank, 2 different places, without the help of the parents. Waiting near the chicks, we eventually see one of the parents, mainly the female so far. The chicks come out of their hiding places and beg frantically for food as soon as they hear or see one of the parents coming. Otkenbeier's daughter was very excited to see a chick being fed just below her gare, about 300 meters downstream of the nest. Apart from a little wander down to look at one of the fledglings that left in the last 2 days, I've been here watching the nest in the hope of seeing the next fledglings leave. And they don't look as if they're going to leave today. They've been fed a lot. The female has fed them 120 times in just under 9 hours of observation. The male in that time has fed them 5 times. She feeds them in spurts, 1 feed a minute, and then there's a lull. And during that lull, the nestlings look as if they're going to get out of the nest, but then she feeds them and they seem to relax again. So I'm wondering whether if she just didn't feed them so much, they would have got out of the nest by now. Well, I didn't have long to wait. There's one chick at the cave. I think it's a new one. The nest is certainly empty. The female is tearing out the inside of the nest, taking feathers, lining, and other bits and pieces out of the nest repeatedly. Then flying or swimming across to the normal landing rock and disposing of them in the water. So all the remaining chicks must have left the nest, I guess earlier this morning. This is the 4th day since the first chick emerged. I had expected them to come out closer together. The chick has come out of the cave and is trying in vain to get mother's attention. In Europe, dippers also remove the nest lining after the chicks have fledged, but I'm surprised at the intensity with which she is working here, while totally ignoring the nearby chick. This behaviour may help remove nest parasites, important for dippers who often reuse their nests. Now the chick is coming along the shore, apparently trying to get closer to the female. He's doing pretty well swimming across the stream. But the female doesn't seem ready to stop her nest clearing. The chick arrives moments after the female takes off. And then again, she shuns the chick. She's been clearing the nest like this on and off for 40 minutes now, with the same single-mindedness as earlier. The chick went back to the cave, where the female eventually fed him. She then flew off upstream, with the chick hurrying along behind. Since then, she's been feeding that third chick constantly. She usually forages very near the chick. The chicks are getting more and more agile, but they still almost fall in from time to time, particularly when it's windy. Budbire went way downstream, where she found what we think is fledgling 1 and settled in to watch for a while. The female arrived soon after, and there was other wildlife to watch too. And meanwhile I found what is probably fledgling 2, distinguishable by his pale-coloured legs. He emerged from the grass a little way away from the river as soon as the male arrived nearby. It's been raining for about 3.5 hours. It's the first time we've had heavy rain, so we've been lucky. But now it's really pouring down. The morning was fine. We found both the male and the female feeding their chicks, spotted 4 of them. The chicks are often in pairs now. We think there are 4 chicks in all. Clutch size in dippers ranges from 3 to 6. But is most often 4 or 5. There's the chick with pale legs again, at the back of the cave. When there's a pair, the female has been sharing out the food more or less equally. The chicks defecate as if they were still in the nest, turning and backing up.
we saw the female again cleaning her nest out.
And again totally ignoring one of her chicks, who was begging for food nearby. In England, many pairs raise 2 broods of chicks successfully. The female removes the nest lining and then relines the same nest before laying a second clutch. Here in the Altai, nesting begins 2 or 3 months later than in England, and I doubt there's ever enough time to raise 2 broods. The instinctive nest cleaning behaviour persists, though.
It's about 6:30 p.m. now on the 14th of July. The chicks are still all surviving. They're being fed by the parents in various combinations.
The chicks move between parents, spending time downstream with the female, and then going upstream to the male. But the male is doing much less feeding than the female, and doesn't always respond to the chicks' begging calls. The chicks are pecking at various things, but not feeding themselves substantially yet. Occasionally they find a morsel worth eating. But this is really a learning and practice phase. Sheltering under the bank provides protection from the sun and from birds of prey. Dippers are the only birds with white feathered eyelids, and conspicuous blinking is believed to form part of their communication and displays. Dippers have a particularly large preen gland at the base of the tail, and they take oil from it and coat their feathers to keep them waterproof. Without that, their aquatic lifestyle would be impossible. It helps them both to keep warm and to keep their feathers efficient for swimming. From time to time, 1 or 2 chicks have sheltered overnight in the little cave by the nest. This morning, the female yet again spent time clearing the nest out. Again so single-mindedly that she ignored the chick that was begging for food at the cave entrance. So that's 3 days running she's been nest clearing. And that's on top of feeding the chicks, who are now often up to 500 meters away. This afternoon, we were watching down by the Gares when we were invited in to drink meadow cranesbill tea on the occasion of the annual Nardam festival. It was a big party with visitors from Hoft IMAG Center.
"17th of July today, and we've decided to leave tomorrow, back to Ulaanbaatar."
The chicks are now hunting for food more effectively and feeding themselves more and more. They're still experimenting, but they're improving fast. Now much of what they pick up is edible. Dippers are able to see well both in air and water. They can adjust the curvature of the eye lens, in common with other diving birds such as cormorants. They use their long toes and claws to cling to rocks both above and below water, and in swimming too. Litter, like this glass, is rare here, nothing like we find on English rivers. Even so, one chick almost got snagged by a piece of wire. The chicks are moving around much more and generally extending their range upstream. We've seen them up to 800 meters from the nest. Recently, we've seen chicks in groups of 3. I think chick number 2 is the only one with pale legs, so we can track his movements. Here he is 4 days ago, and again 2 days ago, 400 meters upstream. This is him too, catching an adult tipulid, a cranefly. This chick, I think either 5 or 6 days after emergence, rather nervously went after a cranefly larva. This is the same movement he will later use to crack open caddisfly cases.
They're still being fed by the parents.
Particularly by the female, who's been working very hard. The male is now feeding them less and less. He still feeds them from time to time, but mostly he ignores them. Difficult to do when he's being followed and pestered by begging chicks. Sometimes he starts to feed himself. And the chick starts feeding too. It's almost a lesson. He still pecks them at times too. But the chicks still follow him around, despite being fed very little. Then, after a while, they give up and go off to forage on their own. Today, for the first time, I saw the female ignoring begging chicks. Soon the chicks will have to feed themselves.
The female and the male have almost divided the territory into upper and lower, with the male mainly in the upper part and never in the lower part, and the female mainly in the lower part and extending a bit into the upper part. We had never seen any of them, male or female or fledglings, up at our camp. But yesterday we saw the male for the first time, and today we saw 3 fledglings up here with him.
They're flying pretty strongly now. He's investigating our camp refrigerator there. The female has continued until at least the 15th, 2 days ago, to clean the nest out. And we are still seeing this really puzzling behavior, the adult climbing on the back of the chick. The pattern is the same as we saw with the first chick, the adult singing and pecking the chick. Sometimes it looks like mating behavior, but both male and female do it. And they sometimes stand sideways on the chick's back. It must be pretty common, at least in this pair. We've seen it 2 or 3 times daily, recently almost always by the female. Even one of the chicks attempted something like it. We discussed it over an extended tea this morning.
Тэгэхээр доошо бие хамгаалаарэ гэж маш ээж нь айгүйх юу ээж магадгүй л дээ.
Сүслэг.
Ой тийм хаална. Нөгөө нэг тойрог тийм зураг авч яхад энийг өөр чи 2 3 атсан гэдэг эргэлдээд гараагүй байх.
Ингээд лисмэт яваад орж ирээд.
We continued over tea to talk about what we have seen.
Аав ээж нэгээ дулаан газар байж. Энэ бол одоо ингээд намар гэл хүүтрээл өвөл боллоо гэл бүр хүүтэн болчин. Тэрнээс өмнө бол юугаа яах. Тоол ундаа бүх юмаа сурцсан байх хэвээр. Хүүхдэн баалаа гэд хэдрөөсөө баас хийсэн тэр дор нь ингээд сангасан. Тэр дор нь ингээд цэвэрлээл. Тэгээ хушуугаа угаагаад ер нь бол их ажилсаг цэвэрч.
Ганцаархнаа бол амжихгүй хэцүү. Хоёулаа хоод зөөж хоёулаа ингэж хамтаа яжээж тэр дүүнийг гэсэн дөрүлэнгийн юм яах вэ?
Тэгээд хажуугаар нь заримдаа ингээд өнгөтэй манга портой явж суг байсан.
Эхний өдөр яг одоо богн зайд яваад исэн л дээ. Богнох нь ерөөс 10 20 30 метрийн зайд гэл нисэг. Одоо бүр ингээ нэг 7 хоногийн дараа чинь бүр ингээ километрийн зайд явж байгаа юм чинь.
Гэтэ ер нь бол бас дээд доотлолт нь бол нэг доотлын ээж нь аваад дээдлэн аав нь аваад ч юм уу те. Ингээ хязгаарлалтанд бол аав ээж нь бол.
We talked also about dippers as indicators of healthy rivers.
Энэ бол харцлаа байгаа болд бол санаа зовхгүй суухад бол болох юм байна. Тэгээд нутгийн хүмүүс байртай байх хэрэг хэрвээ харцлаа байна.
Амаа гол нь энэ нутгийн ийм залуу хүүхдүүдэд айгүй танин мэдүүлэх хэрэгтэй байхгүй.
Яг ингээд сонирхоод ингээд судлаад хүмүүс анхаарлаа хандуулаад эхлэхээр болоод шалгуулах. Өнөөдөр л ихэд жишээ нь доороос ингээд хөөгөө зураг аваад ирэхэд юу өглөөний цай битгээл баг өдөр донд хүртэл ингээд хөөгөл хүрээд ирж байгаа. Сонирхолтой байгаа байхгүй тийм. Нөгөө тэнтэйгөө хөөцөлгээд.
Цаг бол айгүй яг ерөнхийдөө яг янгот цаг айгүй хурдан өвдсөн тийм.
Голын чимээ хажууд амдарч байна.
Унтахад бараг голын чимээ голын дуу бараг дасчих шиг байна даа.
Тийм. Би бол дуртай. Дуртай. Тийм голын чимээ. Би дуртай. Хамгийн сүүл цай өнөөдөр 3 харц дэгдэхээ энд майхны энд ирээ гаргаж өгөх болчихсон шүү дээ.
Тийм. Бүр манай майхны энд ирж ирсэн шүү дээ.
Careful checking of the video clips shows there were 5 chicks in all. There were 3 in the nest on the 10th, when we knew there were another 2 out on the river that day. So after 15 days here, it's time to go. We have stopped to say goodbye to our neighbours. There's only one lady in camp, and she's glad of our help bringing the meadow cranesbill in out of the rain. After another cup of meadow cranesbill tea, we're off again on the long drive to Ulaanbaatar. We resupplied at the first shop we found, and we have mobile reception. There's a lot of holiday traffic on the road. People really like getting out of the city, and some of the popular overnight spots get pretty crowded. And so, back to Ulaanbaatar, back to city life. I was honored to have my dipper films shown on television and to be invited to talk about dippers and conservation. Many conservation groups are active in Mongolia, especially in the cities, and they work both independently and with government to build support, share their passions, and tackle the threats to wild species and habitats that ultimately endanger human livelihoods. Riverine health can be damaged by poorly managed mining and by poorly managed livestock herding too. Strong legislation on water use and the protection of riverbank habitats and the establishment of river basin organizations provide a basis for local conservation action. Birdwatching is growing in popularity fast, and greater involvement of rural people in monitoring biodiversity, for example, could enhance river basin conservation efforts valley by valley. The people we've met on these various dipper quests have all showed a lot of interest in the bird. We know that the dipper is a good indicator of healthy rivers. Our fates are linked. Dipper and man in the Altai both suffer from the effects of water pollution and rising temperatures. I think the dipper should be adopted as a symbol, a focus for wider public involvement in river basin conservation. Quiet watching and learning about the life of this little bird has enthralled us again, has aroused the interest of our neighbors in the valley, and has drawn attention to the importance of the dipper and its insect prey as indicators of water quality. We followed chicks from Emergence over their first 10 days on the river. From full dependence on the parents to being able to feed themselves. And we discovered this intriguing behaviour, perhaps something to learn more about on our next visit to the Altai.